They called me the scapegoat my whole life, while my sister got everything. But when Mum's lawyer read that will out loud, I watched my golden child sister's face go white. Turns out, Mum had been keeping score this entire time. I'm Margaret, and for 38 years, I lived in my younger sister Emma's shadow. Every family gathering, every holiday, every single milestone, it was always about her. Emma got the praise, the money, the attention. I got the blame. But 3 months ago, everything I thought I knew about my family got flipped completely upside down. And honestly, I'm still trying to process what happened. Let me take you back to the beginning, so you understand just how bad things were. I was born in 1986 in a small town in Connecticut. My parents, Richard and Catherine, had me when they were young. Dad worked at a manufacturing plant. Mum was a secretary at a law firm. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. I was their first kid, and from what I've been told, they were excited about having me. Then Emma came along 4 years later. I don't remember the exact moment things changed, but I remember the feeling. It was like someone flipped a switch in our house. Suddenly, everything revolved around Emma. And I mean everything. When I was 8 and Emma was 4, I remember wanting to show Mom a drawing I'd made at school. I was really proud of it. My teacher had even put a gold star on it. But when I walked into the kitchen, Mum was sitting with Emma, helping her colour in a colouring book. I stood there holding my paper, waiting for Mum to notice me. She never looked up. After about 10 minutes, I just went to my room and taped the drawing to my wall myself. That became the pattern. Emma's kindergarten graduation? Mum and Dad took the day off work, bought her a special dress, took about 100 photos. My 8th grade graduation? Mum said she had to work late. Dad came but left early because he had something to do. I don't even think we have any photos from that day. Looking back, I can see how the patterns formed so early. It wasn't just the big moments either. It was the small, everyday things that really showed me where I stood. Like when I'd come home from school and try to tell Mum about my day. She'd be doing dishes or folding laundry, and she'd give me these distracted, responses. But when Emma came home, even if she was in the middle of something important, Mum would stop everything. She'd sit down with Emma, give her full attention, ask questions, really engage with her. I started keeping things to myself. What was the point of sharing if no one was really listening? In middle school, I tried out for the school play. I'd never done theatre before, but I thought it might be fun. I practiced my audition piece for weeks. I got a small role, not the lead or anything, but I was excited. I told my parents about rehearsals, about when the performance would be. I even wrote the date on the family calendar in the kitchen. The night of the performance, I was backstage getting ready, peeking through the curtain to see if they'd arrived. The lights went down. The show started. I did my scenes. And when it was over and we all came out for the curtain call, I scanned the audience one more time. They weren't there. When I got home that night, Mum was watching TV with Emma. Dad was already in bed. "How was it?" Mum asked, not looking away from the screen. "Fine," I said. "That's good, honey." That was it. No apology. No explanation. I found out later that Emma had wanted to go to the mall, and Mum had taken her. Dad had been tired from work. My first and last theatre performance, and they couldn't be bothered to show up. I stopped trying out for things after that. Why put myself out there if no one cared? High school was worse. I worked hard. Really hard. I got good grades because I thought that's what would make them proud. I made honor roll every semester. I joined clubs. I volunteered. I thought if I just did enough, achieved enough, they'd finally see me. Junior year, I got accepted into the National Honor Society. It was a big deal at my school. There was a ceremony and everything. I told my parents about it 3 weeks in advance. I reminded them multiple times. The day of the ceremony, I put on my best dress and waited by the door. They forgot. They'd gone to watch Emma's soccer game instead. Emma wasn't even good at soccer. She was on the bench most of the time. But they were there, cheering in the stands, while I sat in that auditorium surrounded by other kids and their proud parents. When they got home that night, I was crying in my room. Mum knocked on my door and said, "Oh, sweetie, we're so sorry. Emma's game ran late, but congratulations." That was it. No hug, no real apology. Just a quick congrats, and then she went downstairs to make dinner. I learned that night that nothing I did would ever matter as much as anything Emma did. Senior year, I applied to be valedictorian. I had the grades for it. I'd worked harder than anyone else in my class. But there was another girl, Jennifer, who had the same GPA as me. The school decided to have us both give speeches at graduation. I worked on my speech for weeks. I wrote about perseverance, about pushing through when things are hard, about believing in yourself even when others don't believe in you. I didn't realize at the time that I was basically writing about my own life. Graduation day came. My parents were there, but only because Emma had insisted on coming to see the ceremony. Emma was finishing her freshman year of high school and had some romantic idea about what graduation would be like. I gave my speech. I thought it went well. People clapped. But when I looked out at the audience, trying to find my parents, I saw Dad checking his watch and Mum whispering something to Emma. After the ceremony, during the reception, other parents came up to me. They told me how moving my speech was, how proud my parents must be. My parents were across the room, talking to Emma's friends' parents. They never came over to congratulate me. Not once during the entire reception. We took one family photo, and then they said they were tired and wanted to go home. No celebratory dinner, no party, nothing. Emma got her high school graduation party 4 years later. They rented out a whole restaurant, invited 50 people, had a cake with her face on it, made speeches about how proud they were. I sat at a table in the corner and watched the whole thing like I was observing someone else's family. College applications came around. I'd been saving money from my part-time job at the local grocery store. I applied to 6 schools, all state schools, because that's what we could afford. I got into my top choice, a decent state university about 2 hours away. Dad looked at the acceptance letter and said, "That's nice, Margaret. How are you planning to pay for it?" I told him about my savings, about the partial scholarship I'd gotten, about the student loans I could take out. He nodded, and that was that. No celebration, no proud parent moment, just a nod. 2 years later, Emma applied to colleges. She had okay grades, nothing spectacular. She got into a few schools, including one private university that cost about $40,000 a year. I was home for winter break when she got that acceptance letter. The house exploded with excitement. Mum was crying happy tears. Dad was hugging Emma and saying how proud he was. They went out to dinner that night at the nicest restaurant in town, a restaurant we'd never gone to for any of my achievements. At dinner, Dad announced that he and Mum had been saving money for Emma's education. They'd cover her tuition, room and board, everything. She wouldn't have to worry about loans or working during school. She could just focus on her studies and enjoy the college experience. I sat there with my water glass, doing the math in my head. I'd graduated 2 years earlier with $35,000 in student loans. I'd worked 20 hours a week while taking a full course load. I'd eaten ramen noodles for dinner more times than I could count. And they'd had this money the whole time? I asked Mum about it later that night. Just the two of us in the kitchen. Why didn't you help me with school? She didn't even look guilty. She just said, Emma needs more support than you do. You've always been independent. You figure things out. Emma needs us. That's what I was to them. The independent one. The one who didn't need anything. It was just another way of saying I didn't matter enough to invest in. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I needed support too, that I'd needed them my whole life, that being independent wasn't a personality trait. It was a survival mechanism I'd developed because they'd never been there for me. But I didn't say any of that. I just nodded and went up to my room. That night, I made a decision. I was done trying to earn their love. I was done hoping that one day they'd wake up and see me. I was going to build a life for myself, a good life, and I wasn't going to waste any more energy on people who had made it clear I wasn't their priority. After college, I moved to Boston for work. I'm a software engineer, and I'd gotten a good job at a tech company. I was proud of myself. I'd built a life on my own, without any help from my parents. The job was intense at first, long hours, steep learning curve, but I loved it. I was good at it. I got promoted within 2 years. My salary doubled. I was able to pay off a huge chunk of my student loans. I rented a nice apartment in a good neighborhood. I made friends with my co-workers. I started dating. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was thriving. Emma, meanwhile, changed majors 3 times, took 6 years to graduate, and then moved back home. She worked part-time at a boutique downtown, but mostly lived off Mom and Dad. They never complained. They were just happy to have her around. When I'd call home, which became less and less frequent, Dad would update me on Emma's life. Emma was thinking about going back to school. Emma had started dating someone new. Emma was learning to paint. It was always Emma, Emma, Emma. I'd try to share updates about my own life, about projects I was working on, about places I'd traveled, about promotions I'd gotten. Dad would say, "That's great, honey," in this distracted way, and then find a reason to get off the phone. I visited home maybe twice a year, Christmas and Thanksgiving mostly. Every visit was the same. Emma would be lounging on the couch. Mom would be fussing over her. Dad would be fixing something Emma needed fixed. And I'd sit there like a guest in my own childhood home. One Thanksgiving, I brought my boyfriend at the time, David. Nice guy, worked in finance, treated me well. We'd been dating for almost a year. I thought maybe my parents would be interested in meeting him, in hearing about my life. We walked in the door, and Mum gave me a quick hug before immediately turning to Emma and asking about her new job lead. We sat through dinner, and every time David or I tried to share something about our lives, the conversation somehow turned back to Emma. At one point, I was telling a story about a big project I'd just completed at work. It was a huge deal, something I'd been leading for 6 months. Right in the middle of my story, Emma interrupted to ask Mum if she'd seen her new shoes. And Mum just started talking about the shoes, like I hadn't been speaking at all. David noticed. The drive back to Boston, he said, "Is it always like that?" I wanted to defend them. I wanted to say, "No, it's not always like that. You just caught them on a bad day." But I couldn't lie. "Yeah," I said, "it's always like that." David and I broke up about 6 months later. It wasn't related to my family, but sometimes I wonder if he saw something I didn't want to see, that I'd accepted being treated as less than, that I'd normalized it. The years went by. I got promoted again. Senior software engineer, then lead engineer, then engineering manager. I was making 6 figures. I bought my own condo in Boston, a beautiful 2-bedroom place with exposed brick and huge windows. I made good friends. I dated. I traveled. I built a life I was genuinely proud of. But there was always this hole, this missing piece. I wanted my parents to be proud of me. I wanted them to see me, really see me. I tried one more time when I bought my condo. I was so excited about it. I invited my parents to come visit, to see the place I'd bought with my own money, that I'd earned through my own hard work. They said they'd come. We set a date. I took the day off work, cleaned the whole place, even bought fancy cheese and wine for us to have while I showed them around. They cancelled the morning of. Emma had a bad cold and needed Mom to take care of her. Emma was 30 years old at this point, living at home, and apparently couldn't handle a cold by herself. I sat in my beautiful condo with my fancy cheese and wine, and I cried, not because they'd cancelled, but because I'd been stupid enough to hope that this time would be different. I stopped calling as much after that. I stopped visiting as often. It hurt too much to be invisible in the place where I should have mattered most. Emma, meanwhile, finally got married at 32. Big wedding, of course. Mom and Dad paid for everything. And I mean everything. The venue, the dress, the flowers, the band, the honeymoon. The wedding was at this fancy hotel with a ballroom. There were 300 guests. Emma had 8 bridesmaids. The cake alone probably cost more than my entire college education. I'd estimate they spent about $60,000 on that wedding. I'd gotten married 2 years earlier. Small ceremony at a local park, just close friends. I paid for it myself. My parents came but left right after dinner. They said they had to get home to let the dog out. We didn't even have a dog anymore. The dog had died 6 months earlier. At Emma's wedding, I sat at a table near the back. Not at the family table. Not even close to it. I was seated with some of Trevor's distant cousins, who didn't speak much English. During the reception, Mom gave a speech about Emma, about what a special person she was, how lucky Trevor was to have her, how proud she was to be Emma's mother. She talked about memories from Emma's childhood, funny stories, touching moments. She didn't mention me once, not once, even though I was sitting right there. After the speech, I went to the bathroom and cried for 20 minutes. When I came back out, the dancing had started. Emma was in the middle of the floor, surrounded by friends and family, glowing with happiness. I left early. I don't think anyone noticed. Emma's husband, Trevor, seemed nice enough. He worked in sales. They bought a house about 10 minutes from my parents. Mum was thrilled. She could see Emma whenever she wanted. They'd go shopping together. They'd have lunch dates. They'd spend weekends together. Emma would call Mom multiple times a day just to chat. I'd call maybe once a month. The conversations lasted about 5 minutes. I was now in my late 30s, successful, independent, living a good life. But that little girl inside me, The one who'd waited by the door in her best dress for parents who never showed up, was still there, still hoping, still hurting. Then, last October, I got the call. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a meeting at work when my phone kept buzzing. I glanced at it and saw Emma's name. I ignored it. Emma only called when she needed something, and I was busy. She called again, and again, and again. I excused myself from the meeting and answered. "Margaret?" Her voice was shaking. "It's Mom." My heart dropped into my stomach. Mom had collapsed at home. Dad had called 911. She was at the hospital. It was her heart. I left work immediately. I didn't even go back to my desk. I just grabbed my bag and ran to my car. The drive from Boston to my hometown usually takes about 3 hours. I made it in 2.5. The whole way, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I kept thinking about all the things I'd never said to her. All the times I'd wanted to tell her how much she'd hurt me. All the times I'd wanted her to just see me. And now maybe I'd never get the chance. I also kept thinking about that little girl who'd taped her own drawing to her wall. The teenager who'd sat alone at her honor society induction. The young woman who'd worked her way through college while her parents had money in the bank. All those versions of me, still inside me, all hoping that maybe, somehow, Mom would finally acknowledge what she'd done. When I got to the hospital, Dad was in the waiting room. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. Smaller, somehow. His face was grey, and his hands were shaking. "Where's Emma?" I asked. "With her," he said, gesturing toward the ICU. Of course Emma was allowed in, and I wasn't. I sat with Dad for about 20 minutes before a doctor came out. Mum had had a massive heart attack. They'd done everything they could, but the damage was extensive. She was stable for now, but the next 24 hours were critical. The doctor used words like myocardial infarction and ventricular dysfunction. Big medical terms that all meant the same thing. Mom might not make it. We were allowed to see her, one at a time, for just a few minutes each. Emma came out first, her eyes red from crying. She didn't look at me, just walked past me and out of the hospital. I watched her go and felt a strange emptiness. Even in crisis, even with Mom dying, Emma couldn't acknowledge me. Dad went in next. He was in there for maybe 10 minutes. When he came out, he was crying. Then it was my turn. I walked down that ICU hallway, following the nurse. My legs felt like they weren't quite connected to my body. Everything seemed surreal. The beeping machines, the smell of antiseptic, the fluorescent lights. I walked into that ICU room, and there she was, my mum. Tubes and wires everywhere, machines beeping, a ventilator breathing for her. She looked so fragile, so small in that hospital bed. I sat down next to the bed and took her hand. It was cold. "Hey, Mum," I whispered. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked at me, and for just a second, I saw something in her face. Recognition. Maybe even love. Something I hadn't seen directed at me in years. "Margaret," she breathed. "I'm here," I said. "I'm right here." She squeezed my hand. It was weak, but it was there. Real. Present. "I'm sorry," she said. I froze. In 38 years, I'd never heard her apologize for anything. Not for missing my graduation, not for forgetting about me, not for any of it. "For what?" I asked. Her eyes were filled with tears. "Everything," she whispered. "I'm sorry for everything." I wanted to ask her more. I wanted her to explain. I wanted her to tell me why. Why had she done it? Why had she chosen Emma over me again and again? Why hadn't I been enough? But she was fading again, her eyes closing. The machines started beeping differently. The nurse came in and said I needed to leave, that Mom needed to rest. I stood up, still holding her hand. "Mom," I said, "I need you to know that I'm okay. I turned out okay, despite everything." I don't know if she heard me. Her eyes were closed, but I needed to say it. For me. I walked out of that room and back to the waiting room. Dad was still there. Emma had come back with Trevor. We all just sat there, waiting, not talking. What was there to say? I didn't sleep that night. I stayed at my parents' house, in my old bedroom that had been turned into a guest room years ago. All my stuff was gone, packed away, or thrown out. The walls were a neutral beige now, instead of the blue I'd picked out when I was 12. It was like I'd never existed there. Dad was at the hospital. He'd refused to leave. Emma had gone home to her husband, saying she needed to rest. And I just lay there in that guest bed, in the room that used to be mine, staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment over and over. I'm sorry. What did that mean? Sorry for what? For forgetting my 8th grade graduation? For not helping with college? For 38 years of making me feel invisible? The next day, Mum was still hanging on, still unconscious, but stable. I went to the hospital. Dad was there, hadn't left. He looked exhausted. "You should go home," I told him. "Get some rest. I'll stay." He shook his head. "I can't leave her." Emma showed up around noon. She'd brought food for Dad. She didn't bring anything for me. I don't think it even occurred to her. We took turns sitting with Mom. I'd go in, hold her hand, talk to her, even though she couldn't respond. I told her about my life in Boston, about my job, my friends, my condo, all the things I'd tried to tell her over the years that she'd never really listened to. I told her about David, about how his observation that Thanksgiving had been the beginning of the end for us. "You made me believe I wasn't worth showing up for," I said. And I carried that into my relationships. I picked people who didn't see me, just like you didn't see me. I told her about the therapist I'd started seeing a few months earlier, how I'd finally admitted that my childhood had messed me up, how I was working through it. "I'm going to be okay," I told her. "But I wish you'd given me the chance to hear you say this while you were awake, while we could actually talk about it." Mum died 3 days later. She never woke up enough to talk again. Her organs started failing. The doctors said there was nothing more they could do. We were all there when it happened. Me, Dad, Emma, Trevor. They'd removed the ventilator. We just sat there, watching her breathe, each breath getting weaker, until finally she stopped. The machines started beeping differently, and then the doctors came in, and then it was over. Just like that. She was gone. I felt numb. I'd spent most of my life wanting my mother's love, and now she was dead. That door had closed forever. Whatever chance there might have been for us to fix things, to really talk, to heal, it was gone. Emma sobbed loudly. Dad held her, both of them crying together. I stood on the other side of the bed, watching them, feeling like an outsider even in this moment of shared grief. A nurse came in and asked if we needed anything. Dad shook his head. Emma couldn't speak. I said no, thank you. We all just stood there for a while, none of us quite ready to leave. Finally, Dad said we should go home. There were arrangements to make, people to call, a funeral to plan. The next few days were a blur. Dad mostly shut down. He couldn't make decisions, couldn't function. So Emma and I had to work together to plan the funeral. It was the most we'd communicated in years, and it was awful. Emma wanted a huge funeral. She wanted to invite everyone Mum had ever known. She wanted a choir, flowers everywhere, an expensive casket. I thought it should be smaller, simpler. Mum hadn't been a flashy person. We compromised on most things, but it was tense. Emma kept making comments about how I'd never really known Mum, how I'd barely been around the last few years. Like that was my fault. Like I was the one who'd created the distance. The funeral was the following week. It was strange, being there, listening to people talk about what a wonderful woman Catherine was, how kind she was, how generous, how much she loved her family. I kept thinking, did we know the same person? Because the woman they were describing wasn't the woman who'd raised me. Or maybe she was that person, just not to me. Emma gave a eulogy. She talked about how Mum was her best friend, her rock, her everything. She cried through the whole thing. People were sobbing. She told stories about shopping trips and lunch dates and all the time they'd spent together. My mum was always there for me, Emma said through tears. No matter what I needed, she was there. I don't know how I'm going to live without her. I felt my chest tighten, because I'd lived without her my whole life. I'd learned how to exist without a mother who was present, who showed up, who cared. Emma was just now experiencing what I'd known since I was 8 years old. I didn't give a eulogy. No one asked me to. I guess they all assumed I wouldn't want to, or that I didn't have anything to say. They were probably right. After the funeral, everyone came back to the house. It's what you do, right? Casseroles and condolences. The house was packed with people, all wanting to share their memories of Catherine, all wanting to make sure Dad and Emma were okay. Emma held court in the living room, accepting hugs and sympathy. Dad sat in his chair, looking lost, people coming up to him one by one to offer their condolences. I stayed in the kitchen, washing dishes that didn't need to be washed, making coffee that didn't need to be made, staying busy so I didn't have to stand around making small talk about a mother who'd barely acknowledged my existence. An older woman I didn't recognize came in at one point. She introduced herself as Helen, a friend of Mum's from the law firm where she used to work. "You're Margaret, aren't you?" she said. I nodded, drying a plate that was already dry. "Your mother talked about you," Helen said. I almost laughed. Talked about me? To say what? That I was the independent, one who didn't need anything. That I'd moved away and barely called. But Helen continued. Especially these last few years. She was so proud of what you'd accomplished. Doing it all on your own. She showed me pictures of your condo once. She said you'd bought it yourself. No help from anyone. She seemed really impressed by that. I set the plate down. She never told me that. She should have, Helen said quietly. She talked about you more than you might think. I got the sense that she regretted something, but she never quite said what. Just that she wished things had been different. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just nodded and went back to washing dishes. Helen patted my arm and left the kitchen. I stood there at the sink, hands in soapy water, and let myself cry for the first time since Mum died. Not because I missed her exactly, but because of what could have been, what should have been. The reading of the will was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral. Mum's lawyer, a man named Gerald Parsons, had known our family for years. He'd actually helped Mum with estate planning about 5 years ago, apparently. I didn't know this at the time, But Mr. Parsons later told me that Mum had come back to update her will multiple times over the years, always making small adjustments, until 18 months ago, when she made major changes. I drove home for it. I almost didn't. I figured the will would be straightforward. Everything to Dad. And then when Dad died, everything split between Emma and me. Probably not even split evenly, knowing my family. Emma would get the house, the savings, whatever else there was. I'd get some small token amount. I'd made peace with it. Or at least, I'd told myself I had. What was one more thing to add to the list of ways my parents had chosen Emma over me? The meeting was at Mr. Parsons' office downtown. It was in this old building with creaky floors and dark wood panelling. Very traditional, very serious. Dad was already there when I arrived, sitting in the waiting room. He looked smaller every time I saw him. Grief was shrinking him. Emma and Trevor pulled up right after me. Emma was wearing all black, like she was still in mourning. Which I guess she was. She'd barely stopped crying since Mom died. We all sat in Mr. Parsons' conference room. Awkward small talk about the weather, about traffic. Dad looked tired. Emma looked impatient, fidgeting with her purse. Trevor kept checking his phone, clearly not wanting to be there. I just wanted it to be over. Get the will reading done, accept whatever small amount I was getting, and go back to Boston. Mr. Parsons came in carrying a folder. He was probably in his 60s, grey hair, kind eyes. He'd been at the funeral, but I hadn't really talked to him. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "I know this is a difficult time. Catherine was very specific about her wishes, and I'm here to ensure they're carried out exactly as she intended." He opened the folder and pulled out several documents. Legal papers, official-looking seals, all of it. "The will was last updated 18 months ago," he said. "Catherine came to me and said she needed to make some changes. Important changes. 18 months ago. That was right after Emma's wedding. That big, expensive wedding where I'd sat at the back and left early." Mr. Parsons started reading, legal language most of it. Whereas an heretofore and party of the first part, the house would go to Dad, along with access to their joint accounts for his living expenses. Standard stuff. Dad could live there for the rest of his life. Then he got to the part about what would happen after Dad passed. Upon Richard's death, the house and all remaining assets are to be sold, with the proceeds distributed as follows. I was barely listening. I was thinking about the drive back to Boston, about the work I'd missed, about whether I needed to stop for gas. I was thinking about anything except this room and this moment and this final confirmation that I'd never mattered to my mother. To Emma Marie Fletcher, the sum of $10,000. I looked up. 10,000? That seemed low. Maybe there were other assets I didn't know about. Maybe the house wasn't worth much. Maybe there were debts. The remainder of the estate, including all savings, investments, and proceeds from the sale of the family home, is to be left to Margaret Ann Sullivan. The room went silent. Time seemed to stop. I thought I'd misheard. I looked at Emma. She was staring at Mr. Parsons like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. Her mouth was literally hanging open. Trevor had stopped looking at his phone. Dad was staring at the table. "I'm sorry," Emma said, her voice sharp. "Can you repeat that?" Mr. Parsons looked at her calmly. He'd clearly been expecting this reaction. "Your mother left you $10,000. The rest goes to Margaret." "That's not possible," Emma said. She turned to Dad. Dad, there's been a mistake. Tell him there's been a mistake. Dad was still staring at the table. He didn't say anything. My heart was pounding. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake. Mum wouldn't do this. Mum had never chosen me over Emma for anything in our entire lives. There's no mistake, Mr. Parsons said. Catherine was very clear about this. She actually included a letter to be read at this meeting. Would you like me to read it? Yes, I said. My voice sounded far away, like it was coming from someone else. Please. Mr. Parsons pulled out another document, an envelope with, "To be read at the reading of my will," written on it in Mom's handwriting. I recognized her loopy cursive, the way she made her T's. He opened it carefully and began to read. To my family. I know this will come as a surprise to some of you. I've made the decision to leave the majority of my estate to Margaret, and I want to explain why. My hands were shaking. I clasped them together in my lap, digging my nails into my palms to make sure this was real. For most of Margaret's life, I failed her as a mother. I see that now. I treated her as if she didn't need me, as if she didn't need support or love or recognition. I told myself she was strong, that she was independent, that she'd be fine. But the truth is, I was lazy. It was easier to focus on Emma, who demanded attention, than to give attention to Margaret, who never asked for it. Emma made a sound. A small gasp or sob, I couldn't tell. Trevor reached over and took her hand. I watched Margaret build a life for herself, without any help from her father or me. I watched her work her way through college while we had money sitting in an account. I watched her succeed in her career, buy her own home, become truly independent. And instead of being proud, instead of celebrating her, I used it as an excuse to continue neglecting her. Dad's shoulders were shaking now. He was crying silently, tears running down his face. Emma, my darling Emma, I love you. I have always loved you. But I did you a terrible disservice by making things too easy for you. I paid for everything. I solved every problem. I never let you struggle or fail or figure things out on your own. And in doing so, I didn't prepare you for real life. I created someone who expects things to be handed to her. That's my fault, not yours. But it's a problem nonetheless. This is bullshit, Emma said, standing up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. This is absolute bullshit. Please sit down, Mrs. Fletcher, Mr. Parsons said firmly. I need to finish reading. Emma sat, but she was shaking with anger. Her face was red, her jaw clenched. Margaret asked me once why I didn't help her with college. I told her it was because she was independent, because she didn't need help. The truth is, I was punishing her for not needing me the way Emma did. How terrible is that? To punish your own child for being strong. I felt tears on my face. I hadn't realized I was crying, big, hot tears running down my cheeks. I didn't bother wiping them away. I can't undo the past. I can't give Margaret back her childhood or her youth or all those moments I should have been there for her. But I can do this. I can give her what she's always deserved. Recognition. Acknowledgement. Something tangible that says, I see you. I see what you've done. I see who you are. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Mr. Parsons paused, took a breath, and continued. I know some of you will think this is unfair. Emma, you will probably think this is unfair. But life hasn't been fair to Margaret. I haven't been fair to Margaret. This is my attempt, however inadequate, to balance the scales. The letter went on for another page. Mum talked about specific moments she regretted. The 8th grade graduation she missed. The National Honor Society induction she forgot. My college graduation where she'd left early. My wedding where she'd barely stayed. The condo she'd never come to see. She remembered. She'd actually been keeping track. I remember the day Margaret taped that drawing to her own wall. Mum had written. I remember seeing it there later and feeling a pang of guilt. But I pushed it away. I told myself she was fine. She didn't need validation from me. The truth is, every child needs validation from their mother. Every child needs to feel seen and loved and important. I failed Margaret in this most basic way. She talked about watching me at Emma's wedding, sitting alone at the back table. I saw you leave early, she wrote. I saw the pain on your face during my speech about Emma, and I didn't come after you. I didn't apologize. I just let you go, like I'd let you go so many times before. I will regret that for the rest of my life, however long that is. The letter ended with this. Margaret, I hope you can forgive me someday. I hope you know that my failure to love you properly had nothing to do with you and everything to do with my own shortcomings as a mother. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. This inheritance is not enough. It will never be enough. But it's what I have to give, and I give it freely, with love and with profound regret for all the years I wasted not seeing the remarkable person you are. You are strong, capable, intelligent, and kind. You are all of these things, not because of me, but despite me. I love you. I'm sorry it took me so long to show it. Please use this money to build the life you deserve, the life I should have helped you build from the beginning. Your mother, Catherine. The room was completely silent when Mr. Parsons finished reading. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The only sound was Emma's breathing, fast and angry. Emma was the first to speak. So what? She said. Her voice was cold, hard. I'd never heard her sound like that before. She felt guilty at the end, so she decided to give Margaret everything? That's her way of making up for things. She turned to me, her eyes blazing. You knew about this, didn't you? You got to her at the hospital. You said something to her. You poisoned her against me. I didn't know anything, I said quietly. My voice was steady, but my hands were still shaking. I had no idea. Liar, Emma spat. You've always been jealous of me, always. And you finally found a way to take everything. You manipulated a dying woman. That's enough, Dad said. His voice was rough, broken. Emma, that's enough. You're okay with this? Emma turned on him, fury in every word. You're okay with her cutting me out? She didn't cut you out, Dad said. She left you $10,000. Oh, 10,000? Emma laughed bitterly. It was an ugly sound. How generous. While Margaret gets what? Hundreds of thousands. The estate is valued at approximately $470,000, Mr. Parsons said quietly, carefully. After Richard's passing, and after Emma's bequest, Margaret would inherit approximately $460,000. $460,000. The number hung in the air. I couldn't process it. That was more money than I'd ever imagined having. That was life-changing money. Emma stood up so fast, her chair fell backward with a crash. I'm going to fight this, she said. I'm going to contest the will. Mum wasn't in her right mind. She was sick. She was on medication. This will never hold up. Mrs. Fletcher, Mr. Parsons said calmly. He'd clearly dealt with situations like this before. Your mother was thoroughly evaluated by two different physicians before making these changes. She was completely sound of mind. I have all the documentation, medical reports, psychiatric evaluations, everything. You're welcome to contest it, but I can tell you with near certainty that you won't succeed. Your mother made absolutely sure this will was ironclad. Emma looked at me with such hatred that I actually flinched. Pure, undiluted hatred. Like I was her enemy. Like I'd done something terrible to her. "I hope you're happy," she said, her voice shaking. "I hope this was worth it, because you don't have a sister anymore. As far as I'm concerned, you died with Mum." She stormed out. The door slammed behind her so hard that the windows rattled. Trevor hesitated for a moment, looked at me with something like pity mixed with discomfort, mumbled an apology, and then followed her. Dad and I sat there in that conference room. Mr. Parsons quietly gathered his papers, told us to contact him if we had any questions, and left us alone. The silence was heavy, suffocating. "Dad," I said finally. My voice cracked. "Did you know?" He nodded slowly. "She told me what she was doing. About a year and a half ago. She came home from Mr. Parsons' office and sat me down, told me she'd changed the will. I thought she was being too harsh on Emma. But your mother was firm. She said this was what needed to happen, that she'd made mistakes, and this was the only way she could fix them." "Why didn't she tell me?" I asked. "Why didn't she talk to me about any of this?" "She was ashamed," Dad said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "She didn't know how to face you. That's what she told me. She said she'd wasted so many years, done so much damage, and she didn't know how to make it right. She didn't think you'd forgive her. She didn't think she deserved forgiveness." He looked at me then, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years, really seeing me. "I failed you too, Margaret. Your mother and I both did. We got so caught up in Emma, in making sure Emma was okay, that we forgot you needed us too. We told ourselves you were strong, you were independent, you didn't need us. But that was just an excuse. The truth is, we took the easy road. Emma demanded attention, so we gave it to her. And you didn't demand anything, so we gave you nothing." I'd waited my whole life to hear something like this, and now that I was hearing it, it felt hollow. Too late. Like putting a band-aid on a wound that had already scarred over. "I'm sorry," he said. Tears were streaming down his face now. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I know sorry doesn't give you back your childhood, or make up for all the times we should have been there and weren't. But I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry." We sat there for a while longer. Neither of us quite knew what to say. What do you say after 38 years of neglect gets acknowledged in a single conversation? Finally, we stood up. We went back to the house. The house that would someday be sold, with the money coming to me. Over the next few weeks, Emma tried to contest the will. Just like Mr. Parsons predicted, she got nowhere. The will was airtight. Mom had made absolutely sure of that. She'd gotten medical evaluations. She'd documented everything. She'd even recorded a video of herself explaining her reasoning, just in case Emma tried to claim she wasn't in her right mind. I never saw the video. Mr. Parsons offered to show it to me, but I declined. The letter was enough. Emma started a smear campaign among our extended family. She called cousins, aunts, uncles, old family friends. She told everyone I'd manipulated Mom, that I'd poisoned her against Emma, that I was greedy and cruel, and had taken advantage of a sick woman. Some relatives believed her. I got some nasty messages, texts calling me horrible names, emails saying I should be ashamed of myself. One cousin even called me a vulture, said I'd circled around Mum's deathbed waiting to cash in, but others reached out to me quietly, privately. An aunt I hadn't spoken to in years called me. She said she'd always noticed the difference in how Mum and Dad treated us. She said she'd tried to bring it up with Mom once, years ago, and Mom had gotten defensive and stopped talking to her for months. "Your mother knew," my aunt told me. "She knew what she was doing. She just couldn't admit it. I'm glad she finally did something to make it right, even if it was at the end." A few cousins sent messages of support. They said they were happy for me, that I deserved it. But most of the family sided with Emma, because Emma was the one crying, the one who'd been so close to Mum. I was the distant one, the one who'd moved away and barely visited. So of course I must be the villain in this story. I didn't respond to any of it. I didn't defend myself. I didn't try to explain. I just let it happen. Let them think whatever they wanted to think. What did it matter? I'd spent my whole life being invisible to these people anyway. If they wanted to see me as the villain now, so be it. Dad and I started talking more. Not a lot, but more than we had in years. He'd call me once a week, just to check in. It was awkward at first. We didn't really know how to talk to each other. 38 years of surface-level conversations had created a huge gap between us. But slowly, over time, it got easier. He told me things about Mom I hadn't known, how she'd struggled with anxiety her whole life, how she'd grown up with a critical mother who was never satisfied with anything she did, how she'd sworn she'd be different with her own kids, but had somehow fallen into the same patterns. Emma reminded her of herself, Dad said one day. Needy, insecure, always looking for validation. Your mother understood that. She knew how to deal with it because she'd been that way herself. "And me?" I asked. You reminded her of what she wished she could be, Dad said. Strong, independent, capable. She didn't know how to relate to that. And I think, deep down, she resented you for having what she didn't. So she told herself you didn't need her. It was easier than admitting she didn't know how to be there for you. None of it excused what she'd done, but it helped me understand it a little better. Mum had been a broken person raising kids while carrying her own damage. She'd made terrible choices. She'd hurt me deeply. But she'd also been human, flawed, struggling with her own demons. It didn't make it okay, but it made it make sense. 3 months after the will reading, I made my decision about what to do with the money. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. $460,000. It felt wrong somehow, like blood money, like an apology written in dollar signs because the real words had come too late. I talked to my therapist about it. Yes, I started seeing a therapist. Actually, I'd started a few months before Mom died. Turns out 38 years of being the scapegoat does some damage. Who knew? My therapist asked me what I wanted. Not what I should want, not what was fair or right, but what I actually wanted. I thought about it for weeks, lay awake at night thinking about it, talked it through in session after session. Finally, I figured it out. I set up a trust fund. Half of my eventual inheritance would go into a scholarship fund for students who are the first in their families to go to college and don't have parental financial support. The kind of students who work their way through school, who take out loans, who eat ramen and figure it out on their own. Students like I had been. The fund is called the Catherine Sullivan Second Chance Scholarship because Mum didn't give me a first chance, but she gave me a second one. And I wanted to use that to give other kids the chances they deserved. The other half I'm keeping. Not because I'm greedy, but because I deserve it. I deserve to have something that says my mother saw me, even if it was at the very end. I deserve security and comfort and the ability to live my life without constantly struggling. I paid off the rest of my student loans. All of them. Gone. That weight I'd been carrying for 15 years, just gone. I'm planning to use some of the money to travel, to see places I've always wanted to see but couldn't afford, to take time off work and just exist without constantly pushing and striving and proving myself. And maybe, eventually, I'll use some of it to start my own company. I've always had ideas, dreams I've pushed aside because they seemed too risky. Now I have a safety net. Now I can take risks. I told Dad about my decision. He cried. He said Mum would have loved that, the scholarship fund. I don't know if that's true, but I appreciated him saying it. Emma and I haven't spoken since the will reading. I heard through Dad that she and Trevor are fine, that they're moving on with their lives. She got a better job. They're talking about starting a family. I hope that's true. Despite everything, I don't hate her. She was just as damaged by Mum and Dad's parenting as I was, just in a different way. Mum was right about that in her letter. By making everything easy for Emma, by never letting her struggle, Mum didn't prepare her for real life. Emma never learned how to handle disappointment, how to deal with things not going her way, how to build something on her own. I learned all of those things. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. And as much as it hurt at the time, those lessons made me who I am. I'm not saying I'm glad my childhood was what it was. I'm not grateful for the neglect or the pain or the years of feeling invisible. That would be ridiculous. But I survived it. And more than that, I built a good life despite it. I think about Mom a lot. About that moment in the hospital when she squeezed my hand and said she was sorry. I wish she'd said it sooner. I wish she'd had the courage to face me, to really talk to me about all of it while she was still alive. I wish we could have had the conversation we needed to have. The one where I got to tell her how much she hurt me, and she got to explain why, and we got to try to find some kind of understanding or forgiveness or closure. But she didn't, and I have to make peace with that. The truth is, finding out about the will didn't fix everything. It didn't erase 38 years of pain. It didn't give me back my childhood or heal all the wounds. Money can't do that. A letter read after someone's death can't do that. But what it did do was give me something I'd never had before. Proof. Tangible, undeniable proof that Mom had seen what she'd done, that she'd recognized it, that she'd tried, in her own flawed way, to make it right. She'd been keeping score. All those years, she'd been watching. She'd seen me tape that drawing to my own wall. She'd noticed when I left her speech at Emma's wedding early. She'd been aware of her choices, even if she couldn't bring herself to change them while she was alive. And at the end, she'd tried to balance the scales. Is it enough? No. Nothing could ever be enough to make up for a childhood of neglect. But it's something. It's acknowledgement. It's validation. It's proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't too sensitive, that the difference in how I was treated was real. And sometimes that's enough. I'm not the scapegoat anymore. I'm not invisible. I'm not the girl waiting by the door in her best dress for parents who never show up. I'm just Margaret, a woman who survived a difficult childhood, who built a good life despite everything, and who is learning, slowly, to forgive. Not because my family deserves forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. I deserve to put down the weight of all that anger and hurt and disappointment. I deserve to stop waiting for people who are never going to show up. I deserve to stop hoping for love from people who don't know how to give it. I deserve to move forward. That's my story. The golden child didn't get the golden inheritance. The will revealed the truth that Mom had been too afraid to speak while she was alive, that she'd seen everything, remembered everything, regretted everything. And I'm still figuring out what it all means, still processing, still healing. But for the first time in my life, I feel seen. Really, truly seen. And that's worth more than any amount of money. That's worth everything. If this story hit close to home, hit subscribe